Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you try, you keep ending up in the same emotional place? You tell yourself you've moved on, yet one trigger, one memory, one word, and it feels like you're right back where the pain began? That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's your brain playing an old survival game that it doesn't realize has already ended. The brain's number one mission has never been happiness. It has always been survival. Every thought, every reflex, every emotion you experience is rooted in that primal command: stay alive. When trauma enters your life, the brain immediately shifts gears. It stops prioritizing growth, creativity, and joy, and instead becomes a full-time security guard. It starts scanning every environment, every tone of voice, every facial expression for threats. This isn't a conscious choice. It's an automatic response hardwired into your biology. The same brain regions that once helped early humans run from predators now react to emotional danger in the exact same way. When someone betrays you, humiliates you, or hurts you deeply, your brain doesn't differentiate between a physical wound and an emotional one. It sets off alarms, flooding your body with signals that scream, "You're not safe." In that moment, your brain builds walls. It records every detail of the traumatic experience, the sounds, the smells, the sensations, and encodes them as danger cues. Later, even if you're no longer in harm's way, those cues can be enough to activate the same fear circuits again. This is why a single word, a look, or even a scent can pull you back into a storm of emotion you thought you had escaped. Your rational mind says, "It's over." But your survival brain doesn't believe it. It keeps reacting as if the threat is still present, and that reaction becomes a loop. You might find yourself withdrawing from people, second-guessing your instincts, or sabotaging opportunities because deep down, your brain has learned that vulnerability equals pain. It's not you trying to fail, it's your brain trying to protect you. When this survival mode becomes chronic, it reshapes the way you experience life. Your amygdala, the brain's fear center, stays overactive, always ready to sound the alarm. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, planning, and emotional regulation, goes offline under constant stress. This imbalance keeps you reactive rather than reflective, stuck in fight, flight, or freeze instead of growth. You might notice it in small ways. Feeling anxious in calm environments, mistrusting people who show kindness, or waiting for something to go wrong even when things are good. That's your brain saying, "Last time you relaxed, you got hurt. Don't make that mistake again." It's trying to save you from future pain by replaying the past, but in doing so, it robs you of the present. Trauma conditions your mind to equate safety with control. You start micromanaging situations, relationships, even your emotions, because unpredictability feels like danger. This hypervigilance keeps your nervous system constantly on edge. You stop resting deeply, thinking freely, or connecting fully because your brain won't let its guard down. It's as though it has built a fortress around your potential, believing that if nothing gets in, nothing can hurt you. But that same fortress keeps love, trust, and peace out as well. The protective mechanism that once saved you now silently suffocates you. And because this pattern operates beneath conscious awareness, you might not even recognize how much of your life is being filtered through fear. You may think you're being careful, wise, or realistic, but what's actually happening is that your brain has mistaken the absence of danger for danger itself. What makes this even more complex is that the survival brain learns fast, but forgets slow. It takes only one major shock to rewire its priorities, but it can take years of intentional effort to convince it that the world is safe again. The same energy that once mobilized to protect you from trauma doesn't automatically shut off after the storm passes. It lingers like background noise, shaping your behaviors, your relationships, and even your self-image. You start to identify with the patterns your brain created. I'm anxious. I'm broken. I'm not good with people. But these aren't your identity. They're adaptations. They are the brain's way of keeping you alive when life once felt unlivable. In truth, this is the brain's brilliance twisted by pain. It's not malfunctioning. It's overfunctioning. It believes danger is everywhere because it loved you enough to ensure you'd never experience that kind of suffering again. The irony is that the more it tries to protect you, the smaller your life becomes. Every decision starts being filtered through one question: will this hurt me? And when your brain operates from that question long enough, Joy feels risky, trust feels foolish, and growth feels unsafe. This is how trauma tricks the brain. It convinces it that safety is found in shrinking, in staying hidden, in never taking emotional risks again. The brain's loyalty to your survival becomes the very thing that keeps you stuck. Every time your brain senses something that reminds it of past pain, whether it's a tone of voice, a certain environment, or even an innocent expression, it automatically replays an old survival script. This loop is not conscious, it's instinctive. The brain doesn't stop to ask, is this really dangerous now? It only asks, does this feel familiar? And if the feeling matches an old wound, it reacts as though the threat has returned. That's the loop of protection. The brain continuously trying to keep you safe by reactivating old defenses, even when those defenses are no longer needed. It's like having a smoke alarm that keeps going off every time you cook, not because there's a fire, but because it once detected one. At first, this feels like safety, avoiding certain people, staying quiet, not trusting easily, but over time it becomes a trap. The brain's protective loop begins to govern your choices, limiting your ability to connect, create, and grow. This loop begins with the brain's incredible memory for danger. When trauma happens, the amygdala stores the emotional intensity of that moment, while the hippocampus records the context, where you were, who was there, what it felt like. Later, when anything remotely similar occurs, the amygdala reacts instantly, often before your rational mind can intervene. You feel your heart race, your stomach tighten, your chest close up, all signs that your body believes it's back in that same situation. You might tell yourself, now, this isn't the past, but your brain doesn't hear language. It listens to sensations. So if your body feels the same way it did when the trauma occurred, your brain assumes the danger is real. That's why logical reassurance rarely works when you're triggered. The protective loop doesn't respond to logic, it responds to survival instincts. As this loop continues, your nervous system becomes trained to anticipate threat even in neutral or positive moments. You might walk into a room and immediately scan for signs of rejection. You might interpret silence as disapproval or kindness as manipulation. The brain, caught in its protective cycle, keeps predicting harm where there is none. It's trying to outsmart pain, but in doing so, it keeps you reliving it. What's worse is that this loop becomes self-reinforcing. The more you avoid what feels unsafe, the more your brain believes it truly is unsafe. Every avoidance confirms the brain's belief that the world outside the trauma is dangerous. Over time, your comfort zone shrinks until it becomes a cage lined with fear, and every attempt to step out triggers alarms that pull you back inside. In relationships, this loop shows up as overreacting or withdrawing. You might snap at someone for a small comment or suddenly go silent after feeling misunderstood. That's not emotional immaturity, it's the protective brain pulling the emergency brake. To the outside world, it looks like mood swings or detachment, but inside, it's the ancient survival system saying, I've seen this pattern before. It led to pain. Shut down now before it happens again. And because the loop operates faster than conscious thought, you often only realize what happened afterward. You replay the moment feeling guilty or confused, but your brain was simply acting out of loyalty to your safety, not logic. The more this pattern repeats, the more it becomes encoded in neural pathways. The brain strengthens what it repeats, so each cycle of fear and withdrawal deepens the groove of protection. Eventually, it doesn't even need a clear trigger. Your mind can create the threat internally through anticipation alone. You start worrying about things that haven't happened, replaying imaginary scenarios that end badly, and your body responds as though those events are real. The brain, unable to distinguish between imagination and experience when it comes to danger, keeps you in a constant state of readiness. It believes that if it can just stay alert enough, it can prevent pain. But that alertness comes at a cost. Chronic tension, anxiety, emotional exhaustion, and disconnection from joy. This loop also explains why healing can feel so uncomfortable. The moment you start experiencing safety, openness, or calm, the brain interprets it as unfamiliar and therefore unsafe. It mistakes peace for danger because chaos is what it's used to surviving. That's why people sometimes sabotage good relationships, abandon new opportunities, or retreat after moments of vulnerability. The brain isn't trying to destroy progress, it's trying to restore what feels normal. The cycle of protection feeds on familiarity, even if that familiarity is painful. The brain equates predictable suffering with safety and unpredictable peace with risk. Breaking that cycle requires teaching your mind that that safety doesn't always mean control, and that calm isn't the same as danger. But until that re-education happens, the loop keeps spinning: trigger, reaction, withdrawal, regret, over and over again. In this endless repetition, the protective brain becomes both guardian and jailer. It guards you from what once hurt you, but it also guards you from everything that could heal you. It traps you in patterns that look like self-sabotage but are actually self-preservation gone too far. It's a reflexive loop, not a conscious decision. And that's why compassion is crucial in the process of breaking it. You can't fight the loop with anger. You have to understand it. Because only when you recognize that the brain's fear isn't your enemy, but a misguided form of love, can you begin to guide it towards something greater than protection: transformation. When trauma strikes, it doesn't just leave emotional scars, it rewires your entire biochemistry. The brain, flooded with signals of danger, triggers a hormonal storm that was originally designed for short-term survival. Adrenaline surges to sharpen your senses. Cortisol floods your bloodstream to mobilize energy, and your heart rate accelerates to prepare for fight or flight. In moments of true danger, this reaction is life-saving. But when trauma becomes trapped in the nervous system, when the brain never receives the signal that the threat is over, those stress chemicals continue to circulate long after the event has passed. The body remains on high alert, the brain continues to scan for danger, and what was once a temporary emergency state becomes a permanent operating system. You begin living not in the present, but in a physiological echo of the past. This constant state of activation reshapes your inner world. Over time, the brain adapts to this flood of stress hormones by recalibrating itself around survival rather than balance. The amygdala becomes hypersensitive, primed to detect even the smallest hint of danger. The hippocampus, which helps differentiate between past and present, shrinks under chronic stress, blurring the line between memory and reality. The prefrontal cortex, the rational decision-making part of the brain, loses influence, leaving emotion and instinct in control. This is why people who have experienced trauma often say they feel hijacked by their emotions or trapped in cycles they can't control. Their bodies are not betraying them. They are obeying the chemistry of survival. Every time the brain senses a reminder of the trauma, it releases another wave of cortisol and adrenaline, keeping the body locked in readiness for a danger that no longer exists. Eventually, this biochemical loop becomes addictive. The body, accustomed to the rush of stress hormones, begins to crave them. The heightened state of alertness, though exhausting, feels familiar, even safe, because it mirrors the internal chaos the brain has normalized. Calm begins to feel foreign, even threatening. When the body has lived in crisis mode long enough, peace doesn't feel peaceful, it feels empty. This is why many trauma survivors unconsciously create or gravitate toward chaos. They seek out high-stress environments, volatile relationships, or constant activity, not because they enjoy suffering, but because their nervous system has become conditioned to function in overdrive. The chemistry of being stuck is not a matter of choice, it's a matter of biology. The body becomes chemically dependent on the very stress it wants to escape. This dependency seeps into every area of life. You might notice that when things finally start going well, an inner tension rises. You wait for the other shoe to drop, your mind invents problems to solve, your body tenses without cause, and you find ways to reintroduce conflict or stress. That's not self-sabotage in the moral sense. It's your body trying to maintain the chemical balance it has grown used to. It's trying to keep you in the zone it recognizes as normal, even if that normal is destructive. This physiological addiction to stress explains why healing feels uncomfortable at first. When you start practicing calm, the brain interprets it as danger because it's unfamiliar. The heart slows, the adrenaline drops, and suddenly you feel uneasy, restless, or anxious. It's not that peace is bad, it's that your nervous system doesn't know how to live there yet. The chemistry of being stuck also affects memory and emotion. Chronic exposure to cortisol dulls your ability to experience pleasure because it suppresses dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and joy. Even happy moments can feel muted, as if life is happening behind glass. This numbing isn't apathy, it's protection. The brain has learned that strong emotion, whether joy or fear, can lead to pain, so it flattens your emotional range to prevent future overwhelm. The cost of that protection is profound. You stop feeling deeply, not just the pain, but also the beauty, excitement, and wonder of life. You exist in a constant gray zone, functional, alert, but never fully alive. What's more, this biochemical pattern can influence your physical health. A body flooded with stress hormones is more prone to inflammation, sleep problems, digestive issues, and immune dysfunction. The mind and body are not separate systems. They are one continuous loop. Every anxious thought sends chemical signals to the body, and every tense muscle sends danger signals back to the brain. This feedback cycle sustains the chemistry of fear, keeping you trapped in survival even when the danger is long gone. And because the brain believes that this state is necessary, it resists change. It mistakes adrenaline for strength and numbness for safety. Over time, the chemistry of trauma becomes the architecture of identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who must always be alert, someone who cannot relax, someone who can't trust peace. But this identity isn't truth, it's chemistry. It's the brain's adaptation to long-term stress, not the core of who you are. The challenge then isn't to fight your biology, but to retrain it, to slowly show your brain and body that safety exists without chaos, that calm can coexist with power. But until that reconditioning happens, the chemistry of being stuck continues its quiet rule, an invisible addiction to survival that tricks you into believing that stillness is danger and struggle is life. The most dangerous trick trauma plays is convincing you that you are the pain you experienced. It fuses the memory of what happened with your sense of self until you can no longer tell where the event ends and where you begin. You stop saying, something bad happened to me, and start saying, I am broken, I am unworthy, I am damaged. The lie trauma tells you is subtle but powerful. It doesn't whisper that the world is unsafe. It whispers that you are the problem. This illusion becomes the lens through which you interpret every experience. When someone rejects you, your mind doesn't say, they're not my person. It says, of course they left. Everyone does. When you fail at something, your brain doesn't say, that was a mistake. It says, I'm a failure. Trauma takes isolated events and turns them into identities. It brands your self-image with shame and then convinces you that shame is truth. This distortion begins in the brain's emotional centers. When trauma floods your nervous system with fear, your amygdala records not just the threat, but your perceived role in it. If you were powerless, it encodes powerlessness. If you were humiliated, it encodes shame. If you were betrayed, it encodes unworthiness. These emotional imprints become internalized narratives that repeat long after the original pain is gone. The mind starts rehearsing them unconsciously, reinforcing neural pathways of self-blame and fear. Over time, you begin to see yourself not as someone who experienced trauma, but as someone defined by it. The brain confuses memory for identity, and this confusion becomes the root of self-sabotage. You start protecting your trauma instead of healing it because letting go would feel like losing a piece of who you are. This internalized lie affects how you show up in the world. When you believe you are your pain, you begin to live from it. You seek relationships that mirror your wounds because they feel familiar. You unconsciously recreate old dynamics, not because you want to, but because your nervous system recognizes them as home. If love once felt like walking on eggshells, peace will feel unnatural. If safety once meant silence, speaking up will feel terrifying. The brain clings to what it knows, even when what it knows hurts. So you repeat cycles that validate the lie. Every betrayal, every disappointment, every rejection becomes proof that your pain is who you are. This is the cruel genius of trauma. It tricks you into cooperating with your own imprisonment. On a biological level, these emotional narratives are reinforced through neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experience. Every time you think, I'm not enough, neurons fire together to strengthen that belief. Every time you expect rejection, your brain prepares for it and interprets neutral behavior as confirmation. This is not imagination, it's the nervous system replaying its programming. The subconscious mind becomes a loop of old messages, and you begin living a story that's no longer true. The tragedy reality is that you start mistaking survival adaptations for personality traits. You call yourself too sensitive when you're actually hypervigilant. You say you don't trust people when you're actually protecting yourself from reliving old pain. You call yourself lazy when your body is exhausted from years of chronic stress. Trauma convinces you that these defenses are who you are, when in truth, they are who you had to become to survive. This deception seeps into your perception of worth. You might find yourself striving endlessly for approval, mistaking achievement for acceptance, or staying silent to avoid conflict. The brain, still wired for survival, makes you perform for love and apologize for existing. Every action is subconsciously driven by the need to prove that you are not what the trauma said you were, yet no amount of external validation can rewrite an internal lie. You can earn success, receive love, and still feel unworthy because the brain doesn't update its story through logic. It updates it through experience. And until you experience yourself as safe, capable, and enough, the old programming continues to whisper, "You don't belong," even in moments of belonging. What makes this trick so powerful is that it operates beneath awareness. You can't see it from the inside because it shapes how you see. It's like wearing tinted glasses for so long that you forget they're there. Every interpretation, every emotion, every relationship is filtered through that lens of pain. Even healing can trigger resistance because releasing the identity built around trauma feels like stepping into the unknown. The brain fears that if you're not your pain, you'll lose the map it's been using to navigate life. But that map was drawn during chaos. It was meant to help you survive, not to guide you toward freedom. The danger isn't that you'll forget what happened, it's that you'll let it define who you become. The lie trauma tells you is insidious. It doesn't just distort how you see the world. It distorts how you see yourself in it. It convinces you that the wound is permanent, that healing means pretending it never happened, and that you don't deserve the peace you crave. It binds your sense of identity to your suffering and makes you fear life beyond it. But the truth is, you were never the pain itself. You were the consciousness that endured it. The brain's trick is powerful, but it is still just a trick, a protective illusion that once kept you safe. The pain was real, but it was never the whole of you. It was a chapter, not your name. And once you begin to see that, the brain starts to loosen its grip, and the illusion begins to crack. Rewiring the brain after trauma is not a single act of willpower. It is a process of repetition, awareness, and gentleness. The same brain that once learned fear can learn safety, but it must be shown, not told. Every time you face a trigger and choose a new response, no matter how small, you begin altering the neural pathways that have been firing for years. This is because the brain is plastic. It is constantly changing based on experience. When trauma first occurred, your brain built strong connections around fear, avoidance, and protection. Those connections became the default setting, firing automatically at the first hint of threat. But when you intentionally introduce new experiences of calm, safety, and control, you activate different neural networks. Over time, with enough repetition, those new networks grow stronger and the old ones weaken. The brain begins to realize that the world it's defending against is no longer the same one you're living in. At the heart of rewiring lies the practice of awareness. You cannot change what you do not see. Most trauma responses happen below the surface of consciousness. The body reacts before the mind can catch up. That's why awareness is not about judgment. It's about noticing the tightening in your chest when someone raises their voice, noticing the urge to shut down when conflict arises, noticing the racing thoughts that say, "I'm not safe." This act of noticing interrupts the automatic cycle. It moves you from reaction to observation, from instinct to choice. In those few seconds of awareness, you begin to reclaim power over the wiring that once controlled you. The prefrontal cortex, which often goes offline during stress, re-engages, bringing logic and reflection back into the picture. The more often you pause, breathe, and name what's happening, the more you strengthen the neural bridge between emotion and regulation. Rewiring doesn't mean erasing the past. It means teaching your nervous system that the past no longer defines the present. The brain's primary language is experience, not reasoning. You can tell yourself, "I'm safe now," but until your body feels safe, the brain won't believe it. That's why healing requires both mental and physical engagement. Breathing exercises, grounding techniques, gentle movement, and mindfulness practices help retrain the body's stress response. Each time you calm your body during a trigger, you're sending new data to the brain. We survived this. We are okay. Slowly, the brain starts to update its internal model of the world. The amygdala quiets down, the hippocampus becomes more accurate at distinguishing past from present, and the prefrontal cortex strengthens its ability to regulate emotion. These biological changes are the foundation of psychological freedom. But rewiring the brain isn't always comfortable. When you start responding differently, the old neural patterns resist. They were built for protection, and they will test your commitment to change. You might feel anxiety when you try to relax, or guilt when you set boundaries, or emptiness when chaos subsides. This is the brain's way of asking, are you sure this new way is safe? It's the same protective instinct, only now it's defending outdated programming. The discomfort isn't a sign that you're failing, it's proof that your brain is reorganizing itself. Every moment you endure that discomfort without returning to the old habit, you weaken the fear circuit and strengthen the pathway of safety. Just as trauma was learned through repeated threat, healing is learned through repeated calm. Small, consistent actions are what rewire the brain, not grand transformations. Choosing to breathe before reacting, speaking honestly instead of shutting down, letting yourself rest without feeling guilty. Each of these choices may seem insignificant, but neurologically they are rewiring events. The brain is constantly recording cause and effect. When it notices that new behaviors lead to safety rather than harm, it starts favoring those neural routes. The more you practice, the faster these new pathways fire, until eventually they replace the old reflexes entirely. What once felt impossible, trusting, relaxing, connecting, becomes natural again. The brain learns that peace is not a threat, but a new form of strength. Another essential element of rewiring is compassion. The brain heals faster in environments of kindness. When you criticize yourself for being too slow or too emotional, you activate the same stress circuits that trauma built. But when you respond to yourself with understanding, acknowledging that your reactions are protective, not defective, you engage the neural networks of safety and belonging. Compassion is not weakness. It's the bridge between survival and restoration. It teaches your brain that it no longer needs to guard against its own emotions. It allows you to feel without fear. Over time, this process reshapes not only your internal world, but also how you interact with the external one. The relationships that once triggered fear begin to feel safer. The places that once overwhelmed you start to feel open again. The very experiences that used to send your nervous system into chaos become opportunities for integration. This is the miracle of neuroplasticity. The same system that once trapped you can become your greatest ally in freedom. Rewiring the brain is not about forcing positivity or denying pain. It's about patiently showing your mind and body again and again that life beyond trauma is not only possible but sustainable. And with each repetition, the new pathways of peace grow stronger until one day, calm no longer feels foreign, it feels like home. Turning pain into power begins with one radical shift in perception, seeing your trauma not as a curse, but as raw material for transformation. The very experiences that once broke you can become the foundation of your strength when you stop running from them and start learning through them. This isn't about glorifying suffering, it's about reclaiming authorship over your story. For so long, the pain has dictated the script. It told you who you could be, how far you could go, and what you were allowed to feel. But when you begin to confront that pain, not with fear, but with curiosity, you start to extract meaning from it. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin asking, what can this teach me about who I'm becoming? That single question flips the entire dynamic. It shifts you from being a passive survivor to an active creator. Trauma might have shaped your mind's landscape, but you hold the pen now, and the next chapters are unwritten. Transformation happens the moment you refuse to let pain be the final word. When you face what hurt you without collapsing into it, you reclaim energy that was once trapped in fear. That energy becomes fuel for growth, creativity, empathy, and purpose. Every scar tells a story of survival, but survival isn't the end game. It's the foundation for evolution. The human spirit was never designed just to endure. It was designed to transcend. What you've been through can become the very thing that awakens your deepest strength, because pain has a way of stripping away illusion. It exposes what's real. It reveals what truly matters, and it calls forth capacities you didn't know you had until you were forced to find them. The same fire that once burned you can forge you if you learn how to stand inside it differently. But turning pain into power doesn't mean denying the hurt. It means facing it without letting it define you. Many people get stuck because they mistake acceptance for surrender. Acceptance isn't giving up. It's stepping into truth. It's acknowledging what happened without resisting it, and in doing so, releasing the emotional charge that keeps you tethered to it. When you accept, you stop fighting the past and start reclaiming your energy from it. That freed energy becomes clarity, and clarity becomes movement. You begin to see patterns for what they are, protective, not permanent, and once you understand that every breakdown carried a hidden instruction, you can start using that knowledge consciously. You become more than a survivor. You become a strategist for your own rebirth. Turning pain into power also expands empathy. When you've walked through darkness and found your way out, you see other people's pain differently. You recognize the masks, the defenses, the fear, and instead of judgment, you feel compassion. This doesn't make you weaker, it makes you wiser. It's what transforms woundedness into wisdom. Every time you reach back and help someone still trapped in the cycle you escaped, you reinforce your own healing. Pain loses its grip when it becomes purposeful. The moment your suffering starts serving something larger than itself, it transforms from a wound into a weapon of light. You begin to realize that what once made you feel powerless now equips you to empower others. Your vulnerability becomes your authority, and your story becomes a roadmap for someone else's liberation. Biologically, even this transformation leaves its imprint. The same brain that learned fear can also learn resilience. Acts of courage, empathy, and connection release dopamine and oxytocin, the brain's reward chemicals, retraining your system to associate vulnerability with safety rather than danger. Each time you take a step forward despite fear, the neural circuits of courage strengthen. You begin to experience a feedback loop of empowerment. The more you act from strength, the more your brain identifies you as strong. This isn't just emotional healing, it's neurochemical evolution. The biology of trauma can be rewritten through consistent acts of bravery and truth. Still, the transformation isn't linear. There will be moments when the old pain resurfaces, when the echoes of the past try to convince you that you're still the same person who once broke. But each time you respond differently, you reaffirm to your brain that the past no longer defines the present. That repetition rewires not only your thoughts, but your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who survived trauma and start recognizing yourself as someone who transformed through it. That's the essence of turning pain into power. It's not pretending the fire never came. It's realizing you learned how to walk through it without being consumed. Eventually, the very thing that once silenced you becomes the force that makes you speak louder. The memories that once triggered shame become stories of triumph. The emotions that once felt unbearable become signals guiding you toward deeper authenticity. Pain, when integrated, becomes wisdom. It teaches endurance, empathy, focus, and faith. And when you harness those lessons, your past no longer haunts you, it fuels you. The cracks that trauma left behind are not weaknesses. They are openings where light gets in, and once that light enters, it never leaves.